Brett Sockold here, helping you make every class Catholic. Teachers who are invested in teaching every subject area from a Catholic point of view know that they don't want to teach it in a way that feels artificial or tacked on or contrived. And so they're always looking for ways to make their infusing of Catholic faith into their teaching more holistic and more integrated. And in that regard, I want to say, in my experience, the gold standard is when the students lead the conversation. There's no problem with the teacher leading the conversation, with asking good questions, with framing things and setting things up to elicit different kinds of engagement. That's all great, and we should do it in lots of ways. But every once in a while, a student will give you an opportunity, a kind of teachable moment that you can't turn down. So I want to share two examples I've heard from teachers in my work. I was in Winnipeg a few weeks ago, and the teacher said one day a student was just overcome by the coherence and the beauty of math. The simple fact that math works just sort of overwhelmed the student, and the student put up their hand and said, "Miss, who invented math?" Now, at this point, I don't care if you've got an exam tomorrow. This is the secret sauce. Like, drop everything. Don't say, that's not a math question. We're busy here with quadratic equations or whatever it is that you're doing. Now, you could give an answer to that. You could say, that's a good question, Susie. God invented math. Now, that's true in a way, but it doesn't actually help you move things along. I think what you say is, Susie just asked a really interesting question. Class, what do we think about that? And the question, who invented math, can lead into all sorts of fascinating conversations about God and creation and humanity and what math means and is it discovered or is it invented, all this kind of stuff. And you can show and you can model that the Catholic Church is not afraid. We don't need to prescribe an answer here. If we follow our logical minds, we're going to get somewhere true, right? And so we trust that kind of process. So that was one. And the other example was a teacher in Connecticut told me one day in science class, a student put up her hand and said, "Miss, how can you be such a faithful Catholic and so certain about your faith and also teach science?" Again, this is the secret sauce. This is not a science question, and it doesn't get a science answer, but it belongs in science class, right? Because we want to think about what science means for our life and how it relates to other things we believe and know and do. And so this is a real opportunity for a teacher to witness to their own faith, which is completely appropriate and encouraged in a Catholic school. But before you witness to your own faith on this, you might turn that around and say, that's really interesting that you asked that question. Why don't you tell me a little bit about why you think those two things are maybe in tension with one another? And again, you could have a really fruitful conversation that could lead to some interesting distinctions and some sharing among the students and exploring worldviews and finding out where maybe a worldview is not as consistent or thoughtful as it imagined itself to be, right? You could have really good conversations about this. So what I would encourage you to do, especially in places like math and science, where the content itself does not always lend itself to an overtly sort of Catholic approach, is set the tone where bigger questions about the value and meaning of the things we're studying is welcome. And when that gets picked up by a student, you go for it. Now, of course, there are students who, are going to start rigging the system and playing the game. And, you're professionals, you know how to deal with that. But the general attitude of questions about the subject are actually, in a certain sense, even more important than the questions within the subject, because they give us some sense of why we're doing what we're doing and what our purpose is. That's like the gold standard when it comes to Catholic academic integration. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this helpful, why not share it and help someone else make every class Catholic?